January 22nd, Saint Vincent of Saragossa, Martyr. The glorious martyr, Saint Vincent, was instructed in the sacred sciences and Christian piety by Saint Valerius, Bishop of Saragossa, who ordained him his deacon and appointed him, though very young, to preach and instruct the people. Dacian, a cruel persecutor, was then governor of Spain. The Emperor Diocletian published the second and third edicts against the Christian clergy in the year 303, which in the following year were put in force against the laity. It seems to have been before these last that Dacian apprehended Valerius and Vincent. They were soon transferred to Valencia, where the governor let them lie long in prison, suffering extreme famine and other miseries. The proconsul hoped that this lingering torture would shake their constancy, but when they were at last brought before him, he was surprised to see them still intrepid in mind and vigorous in body. He then employed alternately threats and promises to induce the prisoners to sacrifice. Valerius, who had an impediment in his speech, making no answer, Vincent said to him, "Father, if you order me, I will speak." "Son," said Valerius, "as I committed to you the dispensation of the word of God, so I now charge you to answer in vindication of the faith which we defend." The deacon then informed the judge that they were ready to suffer everything for the true God, and that in such a cause they could pay no heed either to threats or promises. Dacian contented himself with banishing Valerius. As for St. Vincent, he was determined to assail his resolution by every torture which his cruel temper could suggest. St. Augustine assures us that he suffered torments beyond what any man could have endured unless supported by supernatural strength, and in the midst of them preserved such peace and tranquility as astonished his very persecutors. The rage and chagrin felt by the proconsul were manifest in the twitching of his limbs and the angry glint in his eye and the unsteadiness of his voice. The martyr was first stretched on the rack by his hands and feet, and whilst he hung, his flesh was torn with iron hooks. Vincent, smiling, called the executioners weak and faint-hearted. Dacian thought they spared him and caused them to be beaten, which afforded Vincent an interval of rest. But they soon returned to him, resolved to fully satisfy the cruelty of their master. But the more his body was mangled, the more did the divine presence cherish and comfort his soul. And the judge, seeing the blood which flowed from his body and the frightful condition to which it was reduced, was obliged to confess that the courage of this young cleric had vanquished him. He ordered a cessation of torments, telling Vincent that if he could not be prevailed upon to offer sacrifice to the gods, he could at least give up the sacred books to be burnt, according to the edicts. The martyr answered that he feared torments less than false compassion. Dacian, more incensed than ever, condemned him to the most cruel of tortures, that of fire upon a kind of gridiron, called by the axe the legal torture. Vincent mounted cheerfully the iron bed, in which the bars were of spikes made red hot by the fire underneath. On this dreadful gridiron the martyr was stretched at full length, and his wounds were rubbed with salt. The flames, instead of tormenting, seemed, as St. Augustine says, to give the martyr new vigor and courage, for the more he suffered, the greater seemed to be the inward joy and consolation of his soul. The rage and confusion of the tyrant exceeded all bounds. He completely lost his self-command and was continually inquiring what Vincent did and said, but was always answered that at every moment he seemed to acquire new strength and resolution. At last he was thrown into a dungeon. His legs were set in wooden stocks, stretched very wide, and orders were given that he should be left without food, and that no one should be admitted to see him. But God sent his angels to comfort him. The guard, observing through chinks in the prison walls, saw the prison filled with light, and Vincent walking and praising God. He was converted upon the spot to the Christian faith. At this news Dacian even wept with rage, but he ordered that the prisoner should be allowed some repose. The faithful were then permitted to see him, and coming they dressed his wounds, and dipped clothes in his blood which they kept for themselves and their posterity. A bed was prepared for him, on which he was no sooner laid than his soul was taken to God. Dacian commanded his body to be thrown out upon a marshy field, but a raven defended it from the beasts and birds of prey. Do you wish to be at peace amidst suffering and temptation? Then make it your principal endeavor to grow in habits of prayer and in union with Christ. Have confidence in Him, He will make you victorious over your spiritual enemies and over yourself. He will enlighten your darkness and sweeten your sufferings, and in your solitude and desolation He will draw nigh to you with His holy angels.